All right. It is 6 o'clock, and I
It
feel
is.
like we
It's
got
not.
we
Maybe
got a
it's
lot to
5 o'clock.
cover. What's that?
It's 5 o'clock
Well, it's 5 o'clock.
where I am.
5 o'clock somewhere. It's 5 o'clock over there with you.
Exactly.
Um, all right. So should we get started?
Sure. Why
All
not?
right. Just some quick notes, as I said just earlier. But if you just joined, this will be recorded. So if you want to rewatch or share it with anyone, I'll share the link over the next few days. It is webinar style, so you'll only be able to see our cameras for now. And if you have any questions, there's a chat feature right there. There's a Q&A feature right there. I'll be following those as we go through, just to keep it going. And David's going to run through the beautiful Glenmorangie portfolio that we have tonight. Just quick intros. My name is Eduardo Dorado. I'm the Division Program Manager for Moet Hennessy here in Virginia. So everybody joining us from Virginia, thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you to the Virginia ABC for helping us set this up.
Yep.
Very excited to do this. This is the second of 3 that we have this year. First, we started with Art Begg, did some Wee Beastie about a month ago.
Nice.
And now today we have the pleasure and honor of having Sir David Blackmore, Global Brand Ambassador for the Glenmorangie Company. So David, welcome.
Thanks, Eduardo. Thanks for having me. And again, yes, thank you to the ABC as well for putting this together with us. And excited to see 144 people logged on. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, beautiful.
So without further ado, I guess let's get started. And, so that maybe it softens the blow of having to listen to me, I encourage you to pour a little glass of whiskey number 1, which will be our classic Glenmorangie original, and get that in your glass and start nosing and maybe even take a wee sip as I talk you through a little bit about the brand.
Dave, real quick, could you tell us, because I got this from the store, and this is the pack that we had featured online that they're featuring with the ABC. So what do we have here?
So
I pull this out.
If you can get the thing out of the pack.
Got it.
No problem. So there it is, Glenmorangie. Why don't you hold that up? That's what we're starting with. So Glenmorangie original. And I don't know if how many of you have been to Scotland over the years. I'm guessing not this year. It's a peculiar year.
Fair enough.
I'm originally from Edinburgh, born and raised in Edinburgh. I lived in Scotland until I was about 23 or 24. And actually, it was the Scottish whisky industry that kind of moved me from Scotland. And I spent a couple of years in London working in the whiskey industry, and then out to the States in 2005. And I've been largely US based, but traveling globally ever since, in a normal year, many trips back to Scotland in a year. So a bit unusual this year. I'm feeling a bit homesick, that's for sure.
Fair enough.
I'm from Edinburgh, but our distillery, Glenmorangie, is located right up in the Northern Highlands of Scotland, north of Inverness, by probably about 45 minutes drive north, maybe an hour if you're slow, north of Inverness. And we are located in a town called Tain, T-A-I-N, right in the middle of nowhere, really. It's a small place, and the most important single thing of note about Tain is probably the Glenmorangie distillery, located at the north end of Tain. We've been making whiskey, officially and legally since 1843, but there are records showing that alcohol was made at the Glenmorangie site as far back as 1703. So, it's not something new by any means there. The reason I think that it was such a site chosen for making alcohol is probably down to the fact that we have unusual spring water that bubbles out of the ground just on the hills behind our distillery. And only 2 or 3 distilleries in Scotland are blessed with using mineral-rich water, spring water, and we're one of them. And if you're into beer, if you're into Belgian beer, if you're into real ale from England, for example, you'll know that brewers usually swear by their mineral-rich water that's come through often limestone bedrock. And in fact, distillers in large parts of the states, Kentucky and Tennessee, will also swear by water that's been come through limestone bedrock. Most of Scotland doesn't have that sort of bedrock, but we're really lucky at Glenmorangie to have water that has come through limestone. So way back, before we were a legal distillery, Glenmorangie, the site anyway, was a farm and it was a brewery making beer that apparently was quite well regarded across Scotland back in the 1700s. And I suspect it's because of the water. Why am I telling you that? Well, because Glenmorangie to this day is quite a fruity, floral style of whiskey. And I think it starts with that mineral-rich water for sure. So why don't we grab a glass? And, you know, whether you've got a tulip glass, whether you've got one of these, you know, Glencairn glasses, or whether you've got a rocks glass, you know, let's all chill out a bit about that. It doesn't matter too terribly much as long as you're enjoying the whiskey. I tend to tulip glass, but you know, last night I was using the rocks glass, so it doesn't really matter. So why don't we, Eduardo, why don't you and I get our noses into this?
Now, David, as we're tasting through and starting with the original, I've had a couple of questions already on how we should consume our Glenmorangie. Should it be on the rocks? Should it be neat with a splash of water? And I know it changes within each expression, and there's some different things that we'll get from it, but just to keep in mind.
Okay, so I can give you my advice of how I like to drink these, but ultimately, and this is not meant to sound at all flippant, but drink it however makes you smile. I mean, seriously, whatever makes you happy. But if since you're here and we're doing a tasting, I'm guessing you probably want to get maybe a kind of some advice on how we in the company, when we're making these whiskeys and analyzing them for their aromas and flavors, how we do it. So first off, we would use exactly these glasses in our sensory labs in Scotland. We would, in the sensory lab, nose at whatever full strength is, and then we would probably add a dash of water, just a tiny dash of water, room temperature water, and then go back through and do a nose and then a taste. So a wee drop, I've drunk most of my water already here, as you can probably tell, but get the idea. A wee drop of water. And adding water to any single malt whiskey in particular should almost always open up more of the sort of perfume floral notes that are hidden in the whiskey. So as you add a dash of water to the Glenmorangie Original, lots more kind of almost effervescent orange blossom notes coming through. Finally, let's have a sip. I'm sure you probably have at home already.
Mm-hmm.
Have a sip. And along with all those citrus notes you're getting on the nose, hopefully you're also getting these lovely kind of vanilla and coconut, biscuity notes as well. And that's coming from the use of American white oak that's giving all these lovely vanilla coconut notes. That's kind of the balance with Glenmorangie Original. All the citrusy floral notes, which are, you know, I mentioned the water source, that's quite important. But the number one most important thing that gives us our citrus floral note at Glenmorangie, since we can't go to the distillery, here's a model of one of our stills. And in reality, the neck of our stills are about just under 17 feet tall, at the tallest in all of Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
So what, right?
Still.
But what difference does that make? I'll spare you a boring, long chemistry lesson, but it increases the amount of time that our spirit vapors are in contact with the actual copper of the still by having a taller neck. Copper's used not just because it's malleable and you can sort of beat it into the still shape, but also because it binds with sulfur compounds in particular, and takes them out of the spirit. And trust me, you don't really want those sulfur compounds there. That's the key to why we have these lovely floral notes. Should I use a dropper to add water? again, it's quite a good idea. If you have I mean, I'm lucky I've got a jug here that I know pours really well and accurately. A lot of jugs don't. You can risk making a mistake there. So yeah, water droppers are good. Sometimes the Glencairns come with these little lids, these little glass lids, right? Sometimes. And I find that if I fill the glass lid with water,
Ah.
very carefully add a little drop of water as well. So the lids can be useful. It's about the only darn use for those lids, to be honest.
Yeah, I've seen those around plenty, but didn't really realize what to use them for. That's perfect, actually.
Yeah, I mean, people say that they're there to you can pour the whiskies ahead of time and you won't get so much aeration. I think if we actually put any scientific, try to make that stand up to any scientific standard, it just wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
So they look nice. They stop things falling in your whiskey if you've poured it in advance. You don't want fruit flies and all the rest in there.
Fair enough.
And they have a secondary use they were never designed for, which is if you don't have a dropper or a good water jug, they're handy for that.
David, I got a couple other questions coming up right now. What is the mash bill in the original? Is there any corn that we use at the Glenmorangie company?
Stepping back, single malt Scotch whiskey, 100% barley, 100% malted barley is all we're allowed to use. So the three ingredients for single malt: water, malted barley, yeast. Nothing else. So
yep.
No mash bills for single malt. If you're making grain Scotch whiskey, which is a component of a blended Scotch, you can start using other cereals such as corn, usually wheat these days, actually. But for single malt, it's all barley.
Definitely.
Good question.
I mean, I feel like the original, it's a 10-year, it's the beginning of our entire portfolio, but it still has so many interesting expressions that come out every single time. It's still so complex.
It's often overlooked by people, and it shouldn't be, because it is so complex, and it's a real classic of the style. I know it's hard these days, particularly, to kind of really put your thumb on what Speyside style is and what Highland style is, in particular, because there's so much variation within those regions. But I would maybe be bold enough to say there is a kind of general theme in the Northeast Highlands between Glenmorangie, Clynelish, Old Pulteney, of a particular kind of lighter, fragrant style of Northern Highland whiskey. Mm-hmm. And Glenmorangie is probably Glenmorangie original pretty much is bang on that style.
Definitely. Well, I think this is a perfect segue. Do we only use American oak, or is there also any sherry?
So great question. Glenmorangie original is 100% American oak aged. We use our barrels twice and twice only at Glenmorangie. Now, there's no law in Scotland about that. We could legally use our casks until they literally fall apart.
Why is that important, though?
That's important because every time you use a barrel, it's giving so much of itself. The wood is giving so much of itself to the spirit and turning it, thank God, from white spirit into brown spirit, making whiskey. And if you keep using your casks, after a while, they're just spent. And there's a process in the Scotch industry called dechar rechar, which is where a barrel that is pretty tired out will be taken back to the cooperage. The lids will be taken off. There will be the inside of the char layer inside the barrel will be scoured off, usually with quite often they're like a chain that's flailed around inside where the machine goes in. And then that barrel that has had the char removed is then put back over a flame, over a gas jet, and it's recharged. So dechar, rechar. The theory goes that it will rejuvenate the barrel, and I guess it does to some extent, but we're not really interested at that in those at Glenmorangie. We'll take our barrels from the States. They will have had bourbon in them, Tennessee whiskey bourbon in them previously. They'll get to us, and then what we call first fill are barrels that we are filling up with our spirit for the first time. And what we call second fill are barrels that we're using for a second time. What's in Glenmorangie Original is always a combination of first and second fill Glenmorangie that has aged for at least 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
If we were, if I could take you all to the distillery and taste the two component parts, you would see that first fill is much more creamy than the original, final bottling. Second fill is much more floral and fragrant than first fill. And when we bring it all together, you get a lot of that creaminess and a lot of the fragrance. So it's more than the sum of its parts. That's the beauty of the original.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, as we go on, because I'm sure people still want to taste through.
Sure, absolutely.
We go from the original.
La Santa.
La Santa.
La Santa. So before we get stuck into the next 3 whiskeys here, just a word on finishing. It's something that Glenmorangie certainly kind of pioneered in the early to mid 1980s, and our master distiller Bill Lumsden has become world renowned for really grasping with both hands and being the kind of foremost proponent of that starting in the early 90s. Back in 1987, Glenmorangie launched what we believe to have been the first finished whiskey. There's some debate on that. Unfortunately, this is an empty bottle, and
I was going to say you still have some.
I didn't get to drink all of it. I had a sip from it, but this is I kept the bottle because this is a historic Scotch whiskey. Yeah. Potentially, probably the first intentionally finished whiskey in the world, right there, or so it was.
That's incredible.
Moving on from that, in 1987 when we launched that, and it was a limited edition, we started playing at the end of the 80s into the early 90s with other finishes, and it was in the early 90s that we came out with the world's first range of finished whiskies, which have now, 30 years later, morphed into what you see today as the extra matured range. Extra matured, finished, interchangeable terms, really in terms of what we say. They always start as the original. So we build in the house style. We get that kind of classic Glenmorangie-ness already in the whiskey. And
that
then,
vanilla, that orange.
Ready,
yep.
So, La Santa. Cheers.
Cheers.
Slange. So I apologize for anyone that is eagle-eyed. You'll notice I have a slightly different label. Over the years, we've played with the labels, tweaked it slightly. I just have an older label. I need to go and get myself,
So the same juice.
I don't have enough.
Clearly. Need to share.
Scottish, we don't share. Talking about. So, La Santa sounds quite Spanish, right? The word. You'd think it means the saint or something like that. And in fact, it's not Spanish. It's the old Scottish Gaelic word language. And it's a Gaelic word that means warmth and passion. What? Well, the idea is to try and give you a hint to the style of the whiskey. Mm-hmm. I think of warmth and passion as meaning kind of sweet and spicy.
Sure.
So why don't we have a nose and a taste? We can taste it. We can talk about that.
Mm. Oh, that's phenomenal.
Mm-mm. So I can see a couple of questions there.
Yeah.
I've asked everybody to kind of look at them as well, because my screen, the way I'm set up, is quite far away.
So let me get back to some of them real quick before we go on to it. Tennessee oak, or do we also use Kentucky?
Do we use Tennessee oak or do we use Kentucky barrels as well? Right. So the oak itself is coming from across the Ozarks, mostly Missouri, but not exclusively. But mostly coming from the Ozark mountain range. What's been in the barrels in terms of the American whiskey that goes in them before they come to us is a range of things. It's bourbon, and yes, some of our barrels have had Tennessee whiskey in them as well. I don't want to open the whole debate about is Tennessee whiskey bourbon. because
We won't go there.
the answer is yes. Tennessee whiskey is legally bourbon. They decide not to call themselves bourbon for marketing purposes. But I've probably just stirred up a hornet's nest.
Be careful.
Regardless, we can debate that, argue about that till the cows come home.
Sure.
What's important for us is actually Tennessee whiskey, bourbon from elsewhere, Kentucky bourbon and such like. What it's doing to those barrels is exactly the same. Put it this way, high strength spirit, as a general rule, tends to take more from the barrel than it leaves behind of itself. Same for Glenmorangie, same for Scotch whiskies, It takes from the barrel, it's not leaving a lot of itself in the barrel.
Mm-hmm.
Wines, lower proof spirits, lower proof wines and fortified wines will take something from the barrel, but they do leave a ton of themselves in the barrel. I think it's to do with the proof. And that's the art of finishing. Background seamlessly to talking about finishing.
Right.
Sherry goes into these secondary barrels. It sits there. When they're emptied, those barrels, they come to Scotland. We try and ship within about 2 weeks so they can stay relatively wet. We don't need to worry about anything growing on the inside of the barrels or anything like that. But we estimate there could be as many 2 to 3 bottles of sherry hidden, soaked into the fabric of the wood.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what do? We take our Glenmorangie 10-year-old at cask strength, of course. We're not reducing it in strength yet. We take that out of its American oak barrels, and the stuff that isn't being bottled as 10, well, that goes straight into those sherry casks. And it sits there for 2 years. What does high strength spirit do? It takes from the barrel. What's hidden in the barrel? All that sherry. It pulls that sherry out, it mingles in there itself, and it's more than just dropping 3 bottles worth of sherry into our whiskey. Luckily, over those 2 years, there's also all sorts of oxidative reactions going on. So we get these tertiary flavors. So yes, you can get a sense of sherry, but does it really just taste like Oloroso sherry or Pedro Jimenez sherry? No, there's other flavors as well. That's the beauty.
It's a nice balance, right?
What's that?
I said it's a nice balance.
Yeah, absolutely. So a word on the La Santa. I'd mentioned it briefly there. We are using 2 types of sherry. We're using Oloroso sherry casks, heavily used in the Scotch industry. We're also using a good percentage of Pedro Jimenez sherry casks. The Oloroso sherry casks are bringing the nuttiness that you're getting. The Pedro Jimenez sherry casks are bringing the kind of raisins and milk chocolate notes that hopefully you're getting. Why have one or the other? Hazelnuts, raisins, milk chocolate all together. We know that works as a flavor profile.
Mm-hmm.
And then not 12 years in sherry. We don't want to overwhelm the house style of those floral notes, just the final 2. So you're getting raisins, nuttiness, milk chocolate, coconut, vanilla, floral citrus orange, all of it together, hopefully. And what I get when I taste La Santa, the floral notes come through, the citrus floral notes come through almost like orange marmalade or bitter orange marmalade, or the top of you remember when we could go to bars? Remember that?
Back in the day?
You remember when a bartender...
Feels like so long ago.
A bartender would take a bit of orange rind and just flame it, twist it and flame it.
Yep.
That kind of orange oil, burnt orange oil smell. There's a bit of that in La Santa as well, I find.
Indeed.
Any other... Sherry has a range from very dry to syrupy sweet. Yep. Yes. Oh, good question about Fino. Yeah, we have used Fino casks in the past for some Glenmorangie releases, but this is Oloroso and PX.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, the old bottle I have here, slightly different. What you have is the upgraded one, which is Oloroso and PX finished. What I have is the older one, which was just Oloroso.
Oh,
yeah.
I've had a chance to try both, and honestly, I'm a big fan of the newer upgrade.
That's why I've only got a dusty old bottle of this left, because I've drunk all my other ones.
There you go. We got a question as we're going through, because we want to, again, continue tasting through the line. We're getting some smokiness, some peatiness. What causes that? What do we see in there?
So if you're getting a smokiness in the La Santa, it's not coming from peat. It's not coming from burning of peat at all. We don't really use any peat in the malting of Glenmorangie's barley. But what you are getting are some wood-based phenols, which give you more of a kind of campfire, distant campfire, or leafy notes sometimes as well, like dry leafy notes, distant campfire burning, woody notes instead. That's where it'll be coming from. Predominantly, probably from the well, who knows? But I would guess probably from the sherry casks more than anything. What is a bar? Good question.
Hopefully.
I saw a question about
One day.
PX. Is it similar to Pheno? No. Other end of the spectrum completely. PX is the absolute sweetest, richest of sherries, Pedro Jimenez. And its nickname in Spain is El Rey, the king of sherries. But and it's delicious, but it is honestly something that it's hard to get your way through as one whole glass of the stuff. It is
Sure.
rich. I mean, it's like drinking the syrup that prunes come in. It's very often.
I prefer what's going on in the bottle here.
Right. Oh, seriously, definitely. I mean, I strongly recommend, if you're a fan of finished whiskies, and I did this myself a few years ago, to go out and just buy yourself, don't have to be expensive, a couple of sherries, a bottle of port, a sauterne, and taste them, because it certainly educated my palate to really better understand the whiskies.
Sure.
And it's a sort of tasting that when we're back in doing in-person tastings, I love doing. Bit of a logistical nightmare doing that remotely.
Yeah, that's good. That's really tough. We'll have to stick with what we've got here.
Indeed. So, any other questions? So, yes, you could add some water to this as well. Be careful. I think sherried whiskies start being a little bit more fragile to water sometimes. I start when I'm tasting sherried whiskies, I kind of tend to err on the side of caution when it comes to water. And certainly old sherried whiskies, it's funny. Old sherried whiskies can be big brutes in terms of their flavor. Add some water and they just kind of fall apart often. So just be careful. That's for sure. Any other questions?
Yeah, it's smoke.
If you put a 10-year-old to finish with 2 more years, can you technically call us down to 12? Absolutely. The age of a Scotch whiskey is only referring to the amount of time it's spent in oak. So we don't do this, but in theory, you could age a cask of whiskey for 10 years, take it out of oak, put it into a holding tank somewhere for 1,000 years. Put it, as long as it was still over 40% ABV, you could put it back into oak for 2 years and it'd still be a 12-year-old single malt. It's just the amount of time in oak. Bottle aging may be a thing sometimes if you keep a bottle for a long time, but it's not legally a thing.
Yeah, we wouldn't have the patience to wait 1,000 years, so I think this is long enough.
I'm hoping that drinking whiskey means I'm still around in 1,000 years.
You're still hoping.
Just preserve myself. But it's a good question. Yeah, chime in and out of oak. And actually, sometimes you'll find that with some, if you're a big fan of Scotch whiskies and you've bought some vintage expressions in the past, you might think, wait a minute, that's a whatever 1980 something vintage, and I know it's just available now in the market, but the age doesn't add up. Well, it may well have actually been bottled some time ago and kept around by whichever company until they decided that they were ready to sell it.
Yeah,
that has happened.
Interesting. So now we're going from our 12-year La Santa Sherry to the next item up, which is our 14-year.
Yes, I'm just saying a question. I got a lot of cereal notes from your expression, sort of malty toasted barley finish. That's really nice. Maybe a dumb question. There's no such thing as a dumb question, really. If you're asking questions, you're doing the right thing. But since that's not always so pronounced, is that an intentional decision by the blenders? I think the maltiness coming through from Glenmorangie is, again, just a function of the tall stills giving us a lighter spirit, and then our use of American oak. We're not fans of trying to, overwhelm the spirit. We want you to taste a bit of, where we're from, the character of the distillery, and that's hopefully what you're getting. What's
I
the
would say,
temperature for Glenmorangie Expressions to be drunk at? Uh, honestly, kind of standard room temperature is fine. 20 degrees C, yeah, 68. You know, in Scotland, you might have a problem at sometimes of it being a bit too cold if you're outside, or even inside, actually, come to think of it. The house I grew up on was absolutely bloody freezing all year round. I think the big problem in the States, certainly a lot of the States, is actually just being too hot to drink Scotch at certain times. But, you know, air conditioning is our friend. That's all I'll say. That kind of standard air conditioning temperature is fine.
want to
It's
go
kind of
with?
interesting to see what Scotch whisky does if you drink it in colder environments. It will certainly close up a bit. It'll be very different. And hotter environments. I once tried to drink some Glenmorangie poolside in Las Vegas in August. It was a very bad idea.
That sounds tough.
I'm lucky it didn't just catch fire.
I'm glad you didn't.
I also
we
got
would be able to do this.
You know, I'm the pasty white guy drinking malt beside poolside.
What's your choice? What's your beverage of choice? I'll have the single malt.
The single malt, please.
Thank you.
Yes.
I was going to say, just regarding that last question about the different flavors, I don't think anything is unintentional when it comes to Dr. Bill. So all of those flavors, all those minute flavors you might get from any of our scotches are definitely, it's meant to be pronounced. So
do you want, there's one more question I'd love to answer here.
16 men obtained.
I'm just keeping, but Satya asked, when is ice with Scotch recommended, or is it not? And only a splash of water recommended for some. I'll refer you first of all to my first answer, which may sound flippant, but is absolutely, I mean it, I really mean it. Drink it how it makes you happy. And I'll tell you, to back that up, born and raised in Scotland, I didn't even like Scotch whiskey until I was about 24. You know, I'd had a couple of bad, I know it. But we won't go into details, but at an age that was maybe too young, that I shouldn't be admitting it, I might have accidentally on purpose stolen some Scotch whiskey from the back of my dad's drinks cabinet.
Oh no.
You know, and got my just desserts because I didn't feel so well and I didn't like it, anything to do with the experience. So I kind of stayed off Scotch whiskey for a while. But when I was 23, I had a boss who kind of introduced me to a few expressions of various single malts, and the light bulb went off. How you drink it is really down to you. But I went straight from not liking it to becoming an insufferable whiskey snob. And I'd hope to think I'm not an insufferable whiskey snob anymore. And I would say back then, oh, how dare you never put ice in my single malt. It's a travesty, you know. And I'm afraid most of Scotland probably still would say it's a crime punishable by firing squad. They're wrong. I was wrong. Drink it how you like it.
There you go.
As long as you understand what it's going to do to your whiskey and you enjoy it, drink it that way. Water will open the whiskey up, as we say, makes it more floral, usually, makes it more complex, usually. And that is what we would do in a sensory laboratory where we're not tasting all day because, you know, we wouldn't last very long. We're sampling, nosing, you know, hundreds of samples a day. So water helps us be able to nose easily. And we add quite a lot of water, you know, sometimes as much as 50% water to the cask strength whiskey. So we're really being able to nose it and write the notes. Mm-hmm. But that's not a bar scenario. Ice will do the opposite. It will close your whiskey down a bit, and it will close down the aromas that are there, that have come from the distillation process. And it will leave behind the aromas, as a general rule, that have come from maturation, from the wood. So with Glenmorangie Original, for example, if you like the kind of coconut vanilla notes in there more than the citrus orange notes, you should probably add some ice because it will close down the citrus notes. It will leave the vanilla and coconut notes behind. And don't let anybody tell you you're doing the wrong thing. It's your whiskey. You do however you like with it.
That's very interesting. And going off of that, in terms of it's your whiskey, drink it however you like.
Yeah.
There was a question from Shashi saying, blended goes well with club soda. Is it okay to use with single malt?
You know, absolutely. There's no problem with that at all. A highball is a beautiful drink. Simple cocktails, absolutely. You know, I wish I'd had that around. I wish I'd had that around the bar, the pool in Las Vegas when I was attempting to drink it neat. You know, blended Scotch, I guess, you know, has its place, and blended Scotch is perfectly suited for those long drinks, adding soda and such like. And part of it is that you don't have to worry so much. Oh, am I doing something I shouldn't? Because the price point of most blends is, you know, you don't have to worry so much. So yes, there's a price consideration. I get it with these. You may want to reserve these single malts for the pure enjoyment. I get that. That's what I do most of the time myself. But it isn't wrong, and no one should. The only thing wrong is someone telling you it's wrong.
Of course.
Do what you want.
You enjoy it how you want to, right?
Enjoy it how you want. Even things like mixers. At the end of the day, if you can afford it and it makes you happy, go for it. You know?
Yeah.
Who's to tell you not to?
I love it.
Yeah. I got half the audience has just been like, no. Half the audience is like, yes. But hey, the fun thing about single malt whiskey and this hobby that I've turned into a career is that we all pick up different aromas in the same whiskeys even, because that's just genetically how it works. And we all have our preferences. We all have the whiskeys that one of us likes, you know, somebody else doesn't like it so much. Sure. And there's no right or wrong. We can disagree and we don't have to fight with each other. It's the one place where you can disagree and be friends about it, I think.
So what are we moving on to now?
Right. So let's talk about the Quinta Ruban.
Oh, yes. Let's.
So hopefully the benefits of this coming from the ABC stores is that we know what pack you got. In some of the open markets between different independent stores, I've done these and I'm not sure because we've changed the pack up a bit. So you should all have the same pack, I think. And what I mean by that is in the past, this pack had the Glenmorangie Quinta Ruban as it used to be. This is an empty one, but with a black label and a 12-year-old age statement. The pack that you should have now should have a little miniature version of this with a green label and a 14-year-old age statement. So in the last year or two, we have changed things up. Oh, there's someone already that says they have the 12.
There's two.
Well, this is why I keep my stunt bottle of 12-year-old around, and I'll talk to you about both then, and everyone will be happy here. Up until 2 years ago, we bottled the Quinta Ruban as a 12-year-old, and it was the same process, the same mechanism. 10 years, American white oak, build the house style, transfer, this time not into sherry casks, but into ruby port casks. So same mechanism, different type of secondary cask for 2 years. It worked great, but then things started changing outside of our control. And the big one was the port industry has moved away from using these massive 700-liter port pipes to using a lot more of standard wine barriques, much, much, much smaller. So we were seeing our finishing changing quite considerably because of the surface area to volume ratio, blah, 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 blah. And it was becoming a struggle to keep the same flavor profile. At the same time, we were looking at the aging stocks of what we had in the warehouse, and some of the stocks were starting to age beyond 12 as well. Just, you know, natural supply and demand. That's how it goes. So Bill Lumsden and Brendan McCarran, Brendan works with Bill, Gillian McDonald in the team as well, decided it was maybe time to have a new look at the Quinta Ruban a couple of years back. What could they do to change it up, you know? And that's where the idea of the 14-year-old came about. We had the stocks. The way they've put it together has toned back the red fruit notes that they thought was getting a little bit out of control, to be honest, in the 12-year-old in the last couple of years. Got it back to much more of what they're looking for. So I always get asked, is it now 10+4? Nope, it's not that. Nothing's ever that easy.
Of course
To be
not.
honest, Eduardo, you know how it is with Bill Lumsden. Tough one to get an answer out of sometimes with stuff he
You
doesn't
like
want
to
to
keep
tell
it
you.
real close.
Much tougher now that I can't sit next to him and feed him beer till he tells me. But I've got a rough idea that it's about 11 and a half years in American oak, and the remainder in the Ruby Port barriques now. So why don't we, regardless of which version we have, let's pour ourselves some of the Quinta, 12 or 14. If you have the 12, it should be a little bit redder than the 14 in color. It should be a little bit more red fruit notes than the 14. The 14 is going to be more of the, there's going to be a kind of cedar wood note on the nose. And then when you taste it, there is some red fruit. It's quite spicy at full strength. There's a milk chocolate, dark chocolate progression. There's something like marmalade again, but there's a hint of the red fruit in there as well. And this is one, ask me about ice and water. For me, this one, water, definitely. I love tasting it neat. I get how it was bottled by the team, how it was presented. And then I'll add a reasonably good dash of water to my Quinta.
David,
because I find...
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm just saying this one for me, Eduardo, really starts to blossom and open up with water.
Two quick things. Can you speak to the name? And then could we talk about some food pairings? Because we got a lot of questions on that, including the La Santa.
Quinta Ruban. La Santa, Scots Gaelic word for passion and warmth. Quinta Ruban, Scots Gaelic as well. This time means ruby red. Quinta is not Scots Gaelic. It's Portuguese. And it means a wine house. In the same way that in France, you'd visit a wine chateau. In Spain, you'd visit a bodega. In Portugal, you would visit a quinta. So it's a kind of, again, maybe the marketeers being a little bit too clever for their own good, but Quinta Ruban, it's a hint to Portuguese ruby red wine barrels that we're using here. I don't know if there's a question, but usually there's a question somewhere. Why are you using ruby port casks? I know ruby port's the cheapest port out there. Why aren't you using Tawny port and all the rest? Again, it's not really about the wine per se. It's more and the kind of expense of the wine. It's about what it will do to the final flavor of the whiskey. And we want the red fruit notes. Tawny port wouldn't give us that. Tawny port would give us loads more tannins. We have enough of them. Thank you very much. We need the red fruit notes. So it's ruby port.
Why is it a higher proof?
Higher proof. The proof on all of these is largely decided by the whiskey creation team, where they think it best expresses itself. So the original's at 43, because 43 in the US, actually 40 in Scotland, and 43 is the best, I think. So the US gets the best bottling of the original, and I think it's perfect. It's that softer, more elegant whiskey. Upping the strength too much would change its nature. It'd be delicious, and somebody asked to have Astar included. Astar is kind of where you'd get to, but this is delicious as it is. It's always about, getting the, and we do actually spend a lot of time thinking about that in the Century Lab, what ABV works. Once we've got our bench blends pretty much worked out, we'll then be reducing them in strength and trying the different strengths to where we think it sings the best. That's kind of the answer, really. What was the second? There was a second part to that. There was a second question.
There was another question. I'm trying to keep up. There's another one that just came up. Has the distillery ever played with the white port barrels?
Have we played with the white port? I don't think we've done anything publicly. I don't think anything's been released.
But who knows?
I'll leave it at that. Somebody said, Why replacing the 12 with the 14 economically make not more sense. So, yeah, I mean, we haven't so far taken the price increase on the when it went from 12 to 14. So you're getting a better deal. You're welcome. But remember, age
Take it
isn't
while you
everything.
can.
Age isn't everything on these.
No.
You know? Trust me, I'm a classic example, proof that older isn't better.
Facts. This is true.
Shut it. Shut it, you young. I've known Eduardo since he was just about, learning to walk, I think.
A young lad right out of school, right out of uni.
It's true. Wow. Jeez.
Yeah, it's been that long. Wow.
Yeah.
Been a good time. I mean,
It
can't go wrong with this single malt. You really can't.
Compliments to Bill, yeah.
What else we
I
have?
won't play with white port, Tawny Port. Yeah, I'm not. I don't really know Tawny Port very well, but I'll take your word for it. I love your Scotch. First tried it at Royal Dornoch. Is it food friendly? That was the second part of the question.
That's right. That's what it was.
Yeah, absolutely. The golf course just north of Glenmorangie. And in fact, for their big anniversary, I forget how many, it might be 600 years. I don't know. We actually did a special bottling. We very rarely do special bottlings for organizations or individuals, but there's a Royal Dornoch bottling somewhere out there in the ether. I think it's all sold now. But yeah,
Really?
the second part of the question about food, these finishes and a little influence of wine, I think makes Glenmorangie one of the most readily pairable with food. It's not an easy thing to do with any Scotch whiskey, I don't think, but when you get it right, it really works. So chocolates is an easy one, a no-brainer, as you'd say. A milk chocolate, something a little bit richer, maybe something that has orange zest with it. I actually, with the Kinter Ruban, would go with something like a darker chocolate, maybe even a dark chocolate with sea salt crystals in it. Another thing that works with the Kinter Ruban is Turkish Delight. Rosewater flavored Turkish Delight, because you get the rose water in the whiskey with water. It really pairs well. Our chef at Glenmorangie House in Scotland does an amazing job of pairing these with all sorts of dishes.
John says, what about haggis?
Hey, I'm not having anyone knock haggis. Haggis is great stuff. A good haggis. Stuff. The only thing is, you see, us Scots are too honest. We tell people what's in our sausages, Whereas you don't get to know the details of what's in your hot dogs, and you don't want to know.
We don't want to know.
No, exactly.
we'll keep it at that. I've got some other questions, but I want to save them for a little bit later as we're tasting through. Sure. I guess I don't know if there's anything else on the Kinter Ruban. Reminds me of some Christmas cake.
Christmas cake.
Yeah.
I tell you what, I just made my annual. I bake my mum's recipe for Christmas cake, and I make sure I do it in September, October. I was a bit late this year, and that's so that I can spend the remaining days and months seeing how much alcohol, particularly Scotch whiskey, I can get my cake to absorb. So this idea in America that all sponge cake is dry, my fruitcake, sorry, is dry. My fruitcake is not dry. It's
very.
It is very not temperance cake.
Sounds great.
Yeah. So.
All right.
Cool.
David's mom approves.
Approves of your method, David. Good.
I don't want to run out because I don't know how the time's flying by right now, but could we move on to
I was going to say
nectar?
We're at 6:48, so
I don't know where it went.
I hope this doesn't just cut us off, because that would be very bad.
Hope not too.
If it does, guys, Eduardo, just relog back in and we can start again. But I don't think it should.
No. I think we'll be okay.
So, sherry casks, port casks. Not massively unusual to find that, those casks used in the Scotch industry. I'm well aware. Finishing in those casks, slightly more unusual than a full maturation or, a partial maturation and a mix together, but still, fairly common. What we're moving on to next, though, is something that is a bit unusual, and that is the use of Sauterne barriques. So, until we made this product, I confess I had never tasted Sauterne. It's a dessert wine that is made in France, and the grapes are allowed to stay on the vines very late into the harvest in the hope that they will be infected by a botrytis mold. Sounds delicious, hey? So, only the French could take moldy grapes and make something amazing. Right?
So special, yeah.
So the mold sits on the outside of the grapes, and it lives there, and it drinks all the water out. It uses the water out of the grapes, and it condenses all the sugars. So you get very little wine from this process. That's one of the reasons it's so expensive. And Sauternes, are usually sold in half bottles for ridiculous amounts of money. Bill Lumsden had been wanting to finish a Glenmorangie in a Sauterne barrel for a long time. And we managed to do it back in the 80s briefly with a few casks he'd got his hands on. And it wasn't until the 2000s that he managed to get a reliable supply of Sauterne barriques through the cooperage Tonnellerie François Frère, who he'd built relationships up with. And they build most of the Sauterne Limousin oak barrels for the Sauterne industry. So it's natural that they buy them back and then ship them and sell them and ship them to us. We're getting about 1,000 to 1,500 barriques a year, depending on how the harvest goes. So,
wow.
There's always going to be a limit to how much of this whiskey is available, but it's not massively limited.
Mm-hmm.
So, same idea, 10 years in American oak, 2 years in the Sauterne barrels. Depending on which bottle label you have, because there's been a change here as well. The label I have has a 12-year-old age statement on there. I think the label, most of you guys, especially if you had the green Quinta. What have
if you have the taster pack.
Right, so we changed the packaging slightly again, just to keep everyone, including myself, on our toes. And the age statement disappeared mysteriously off the label. How can I explain that? Purely a marketing decision, but it does leave me in the awkward position of not now legally being able to tell you that it's a 12-year-old anymore. I'd get my knuckles wrapped by the SWA lawyers if I told you it was a 12-year-old. So I can't do that. But what I can maybe tell you, to push the kind of envelope a bit, is I asked Bill Lumsden, so now the label's changed. How have you changed the way you make the whiskey? And he said, I haven't. So you'll have to trust us. That's that. So broadly the same product, And what I have, I'm going to explain that by saying it is a 10+2, because it is.
Sure.
I'm not going to get in trouble for that. So 10 years in American oak, 2 years in the Sauterne barrels. Two things to think about. The actual Sauterne giving a sweetness and a bit of an umami note in there as well because of the botrytis. Also think about the Limousin oak. Spicy, tannic Limousin oak. And that's what brings this all back to a balance. You have the spiciness in there too. So if people here are if anyone here is mostly an American whiskey fan, I suspect this will be your favorite of the evening, because it has a kind of, broad strokes. Maybe I'm overgeneralizing, but it has broad strokes of kind of familiarity to a bourbon drinker, I would say.
Would you add water to this? Kind of like what we were talking about.
Sure. Yeah. If you add a dash of water to this, well, I'll let you do it first.
I've got a little bit in my water bottle, so it's perfect. Don't have the fancy setup that David has.
It's funny. I got this. That's actually a Glencairn jug.
Oh, nice.
Glencairn glasses. And I found it years ago for sale in Pottery Barn.
Really?
Pottery Barn at the mall in New Jersey, of all places.
Of all places, there you go.
Random.
Oh.
So, get your nose in to the nectar with a dash of water. Now, I've given you a moment to kind of make your own thoughts, so I'm not going to lead you. But for me, lemon citrus. almost effervescent, almost sherbet-like.
A lot of that citrus, yeah.
Mm. People saying their favorite here.
I'm not sure if Jim's saying that this or the Signet is his favorite. We had some questions on Signet too.
Ken Hawk, I don't know if I should be flattered or upset with you saying I'm certain you're a Scotch imposter. Your English is too understandable. All I can say is I've spent a lot of time away from Scotland, and yeah, my accent's been corrupted, that's for sure. But a few more of these, and it tends to come back a bit. But it is true. It's funny. Some of our team that come over from who work at both our distilleries, Ardbeg and Glenmorangie, when they come over to the States in a normal year, I sometimes have to do a bit of translation work during their presentations because even I am like, oh, what did you say? You know, it's our accents and our musical instruments sound like we're kind of strangling cats a lot. You know, the bagpipes.
Which is why you bring.
I shouldn't bagpipes. I used to play the bagpipes and I enjoyed it.
Oh, you should bring that back. We'll do that for the next tasting.
Yeah, no, I don't think anybody's looking forward to that. You know, we're all stuck in our homes.
As long as we have Glenmorangie, we can look forward to it, right?
The last thing you want is a guy blasting into your living room bagpipes.
No. I mean, see, Jennifer's in. There you go.
That's awesome.
Elliot's in.
That's funny. Oh. So, yeah, incredibly citrusy on the nose. Have a taste. I sometimes get this slightly kind of pastry-like note, almost like flaky pastry or croissant. Buttery note. No. Kind of interesting. So, if you can, and maybe I've waited too late to say this, keep a tiny bit, even a little tiny dribble of the nectar in your glass, because we're going to talk at least about another whiskey that's not in the pack, but I'm told some people might have it.
Which is
that right, Eduardo?
Which one's this one? I'm assuming yes. We do have it in market. I'm hoping some people were able to get a bottle themselves. I've never tasted it, so I'm incredibly excited for this. Been waiting.
Jeff says this year's trip to Scotland was postponed a year. Any insider recommendations when we visit? Oh gosh, where on earth do I start? Yeah, first of all, my trip to Scotland this year was also postponed, and I'm raring to get back. I just hope that by late spring, early summer, we can all be traveling safely and with fewer restrictions. We'll see. But yeah, recommendations. It very much depends. If you're going for Scotch, what style you like. I'm guessing since you're here, you probably like Glenmorangie. To be honest, we're quite far north. There's plenty of distilleries around us to make it a kind of a trip. But we're not in a kind of area as condensed as Speyside. I mean, nowhere in the world has that many distilleries, like Speyside. But if you get up to Glenmorangie, Glenmorangie House is always a fun place to stay. It's open to the public. There's other nice places around there too in the town of Tain. We have our neighbouring distilleries, Balblair. The distillery manager there is the brother of our head stillman at Glenmorangie.
Oh, wow.
Clynleash and Brora just up the road. Old Pulteney, a bit of a drive further north as well. Dalmore, you have to pass Dalmore to get to Glenmorangie if you're driving up the A9 road. So there's plenty of distilleries to visit for sure. Glenord is pretty close as well, all just kind of just north of Inverness.
Didn't we have some renovations recently at our distillery?
Glenmorangie had an expansion happen,
right?
Where we were supposed to open it this year. That didn't happen.
No, it did not happen.
We had an expansion, and actually more than an expansion, it's kind of a experimental pilot plant built onto the side of the existing distillery that can be ran as just a kind of expansion of the distillery, or it can be run by itself and that allows us to be doing experiments without taking time off of the stills running to make the original and such like. So it'll give us a even more opportunities. It'll give Bill Lumsden even more opportunities to start doing crazy things and experiments. And North Coast 500, someone said, absolutely, yeah. North Coast 500 is a 500 kilometer, whichever, trip around the very north of Scotland, and it runs right past Glenmorangie Distillery. Great drive if you are into motorbiking. It's, Google it. There's people on YouTube that have filmed themselves doing the North Coast 500 on motorbikes. I think there's a couple of TV shows on it too. It's beautiful. So that'd be a fun thing to do. If you're into Islay whiskey, obviously, the challenge coming over from the States with the time zone difference, the investment in getting over to Scotland, and your miserly time off that you get in this country is that, frankly, I think you could spend easily a week just on Islay if you're into that style of whiskey. But you don't see much of the country. You're on an island with 3,500 people. So
that's tough. Like, you have to commit to that.
Yeah, you have to commit to that for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, Eduardo, I guess we'll have a quick chat and taste of cake for anyone that has it at home. If you've grabbed that bottle, here it is. It's a weird looking box. And where's my bottle?
We have some people who don't have cake but are enjoying 18-year with us instead.
Okay.
Some other people are having some Signet.
If you have a bottle of the crazy bottle of cake, the reason we thought we'd include this for those people that had it was that it is finished in Hungarian Royal Tokai casks, which are in many ways kind of similar. It's a similar sort of wine to Sauterne, but it uses the botrytization of the grapes again. But here we're using Hungarian oak. Hungarian Royal Tokai will be used in Hungarian oak. Now, Hungarian oak and Limousin oak are the same species. It's Quercus robur, European oak. But where the oak grows actually makes a huge difference. Bizarrely enough, there is real terroir in oak forests, and Hungarian oak is doing something quite different to this, to the final whiskey from what the Limousin oak was doing. So, Eduardo, your first time.
My first time.
Let's have a nose.
Let's.
Now, our master distiller called this whiskey, it's been called a tale of cake, which is a bit wild and crazy, right? But the idea is, it's taking him back to memories he had as a young lad and his grandmother baking him a pineapple upside down cake. And it's more the sponge in that cake. He had flashes of that experience, of that memory of having that cake made by his grandmother when he first tried the whiskey. And this has been a labor of love for Bill Lumsden. And this time is not the first time he's tried using Hungarian Royal Tokai casks. He tried it decades ago, and it didn't work out so well, and he never bottled that. But he's been determined to come back and get.
But he tried again. Yep.
The thing about, we say that we're experimental, and I think sometimes people think, well, bullshit, that's just a marketing term. We genuinely are. I know of many experimental whiskeys that never saw the light of day because they sucked. Frankly, we're not going to bottle, and we're luckily a big enough company, or we have a big enough company behind us where we can afford to, from time to time, have a thorough screw up and not have to sell it. It will disappear instead.
Completely. Wow. His nose is phenomenal.
Right? Do you get the sense of almost like marzipan?
Yeah.
There's like marzipan. There's almost slightly savory, salty sponge. Sponge cake can sometimes be not too sweet.
No, completely. I can sense that. I can visualize it. You also
get a waft of like something much sweeter. You get the sense of almost white, the white icing, like fondant icing or something. Jeff says, heading to the ABC, be right back. Hurry.
Jeff will still be here.
Yeah, we might be at this rate.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
Ed, nose it against your glass of what we've got left of your nectar.
Of the nectar?
You'll see how different it is. Now, I'm not going to be the one to say this, but I did this comparison last night for the first time with a virtual tasting, and a couple of the audience said, "Wow, the cake just blows the Nectar'dor's nose away now."
It's unbelievable.
It's pretty special.
The nose is beautiful. I mean, I can't get over that. And just
so some people are waiting patiently because they don't have cake, but they do, I believe, have the either the Cadbull 15.
Oh wow!
Or some of them may have the other new one, which is the Malaga. The Malaga finish. Some of that came to the ABC?
The 15 or the Malaga?
Malaga.
I would have to look into that. I know the 15 did.
The 15, okay. But some people have one or the other anyway. So
sure.
the Cadbull 15, the blue label here, we'll just have a little chat about that if you have it.
Mm-hmm.
This goes back to some of our early experimentation, playing with our own fields. We have fields surrounding Glenmorangie House, our own single estate of barley fields. That's the boy there. And for decades now, we have been, the local farmer who farms it for us has worked very closely with us based on everything that we want, all the parameters we're looking for directly at our distillery for the barley. So barley strain, exactly how he and when he harvests it, all the rest of it. So we think it's the best barley every year that we get our hands on. It's only enough to make about a week or two's worth of distillate each year, and historically we haven't really done anything with it. It's kind of just ended up being part of the original, and we've been trying to improve the original even more over time. This is an opportunity to taste that whiskey from that barley at 15 years of age and aged in first fill American white oak. So really, really creamy.
Only first fill, not second.
What's that?
Only first fill?
Just first fill.
Not
so
second, yep.
All of the creamy notes from the first fill, but we get loads of the influence of the actual barley as well. So it's competing nicely to a balance again. So Cadbull 15, Ed, is that your first time? You've had that before.
I have. And I think this is pretty spectacular too. I mean, you really can't go wrong.
It's a little known fact that Ed is so into Glenmorangie that he's actually clad his walls in panels made of white oak barrels.
You're not supposed to tell people. This is right from the distiller.
Because it's not true. Finest pine.
The best you can find.
The best Home Depot has to offer.
The best Home Depot has to offer.
Other home improvement stores are available.
Indeed. Oh man, I have a bunch of questions that we'll have to get to. It's almost going to be like a spitfire, just bang, bang, bang. But you want to talk through this?
The questions, definitely. Oh gosh, I couldn't get the kit anywhere near us. Please send more to Northern Virginia, Fairfax, SOS, SOS, SOS. Right, noted.
Definitely noted.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any questions?
Could you speak to the 1974? Someone's asking for, I'm assuming, the Pride 1974, and any of our rarest that make a good collector's item.
Pride 74.
Do you have a bottle? There was an earlier question about how we get to David's bar, and I'm asking myself the same question.
I was about to say I did. I don't. I've got a different one. Pride 78. Honestly, I'm trying to remember because of all the prides. It's been a while. Ed, help me out here. Pride 74. 81 was Chateau Chem.
I want to say, was it 34?
I'm blanking on the 74 right now. Sorry.
What is our current Pride that we're on right now?
We don't have a Pride right now.
We don't. Would that have been one of the last ones?
But we may well have a Pride next year.
Because it takes some time.
The
That's
Pride,
the
we have something slated to come out next year, whether or not they'll still go with the kind of Pride, name and everything and bottle, I'm not sure.
Mhm.
But I'm excited for it because it's the first Glenmorangie that resulted entirely from an idea I had.
They listen to you.
They did, and it's going to be the only whiskey in the world that will ever have been made in the way it's been made, and probably will remain so forever as well. Because
This is a little insider information.
Harebrained and incredibly expensive idea. The company is never going to do it again, I don't think, and no other company would be stupid enough to do it either. But we did it. So anyway, I can't tell you.
So that's just a teaser.
That is
You
a
have
teaser
to wait.
for a potential new Pride coming
Wow.
out.
Well, I'm trying to look through. There was a question about your favorite American whiskey, and I also want to ask you which of the Glenmorangie is your favorite. And I know the answer, but I love when you tell the story.
So my favorite Glenmorangie, almost without a doubt, is Glenmorangie 18. There it is. It's stunning. In fact, I'm going to have some now. Life's too short. My favorite American whiskey. That is a tough one to answer for me right now, mainly because I've kind of gone through a period of really getting into American whiskey, and I still love it, but I'm not drinking very much American whiskey right now, so I'm not very current. I have always enjoyed the Four Roses, not the single barrel, Four Roses small batch, is it called? I've always enjoyed over the years that Four Roses a lot. I mean, I like the single barrel quite often as well, but I've always enjoyed that. What else have I been enjoying? I know it's mostly sourced whiskey, but I've enjoyed quite a lot of the High West stuff over the years.
Okay.
Stranahan's, up and down a bit, but I've had some really delicious Stranahan's, and I still have a couple of prized bottles of Stranahan's that I know are amazing, and that I don't want to drink it all and have it all disappear. Woodenville, now, full transparency, the company that owns Glenmorangie owns Woodenville, but because of that, I've had an opportunity to taste a lot of different Woodenvilles, and it's really great liquid. Wonderful stuff. Ed, have you tasted? They did a very small experiment where we shipped some former Ardbeg barrels over to.
Oh man, I have a bottle.
Yeah, it's
the triple barrel.
It's good.
Yeah,
triple barrel, really good.
That's unreal.
Palmer says Midwinter Night's Dram. Now that's a really interesting one because there was a bit of a controversy, kind of, not really, because High West, came out with Midwinter's Night's Dram, and then about 2 years later, Glenmorangie came out with a Midwinter Night's Dram, and we know each other. We're our master distillers are mates. I think what happened. Well, I know what happened was that they never intended to sell that outside of the Americas or North America, so they only trademarked it in America. We only ever intended to sell our Midwinter Night's Dram in the UK. And so nobody in our legal team searched for trademark violations or any issues outside of the UK. So nothing came up there either. And came two whiskeys with the same name. And of course, a lot of people online, you know what online's like. People wanted to make it into there's a big fight and blah, blah, blah. There was no such thing. Absolutely none. We both realized, oh shit, what have we done? Well, we more than them realized, oh shit, what have we done? We got the two master distillers on the phone together. They're mates anyway. They sent each other a few bottles of each other's whiskey, and that was it. I I want,
that's how we answer any feuds. You know, if there's any qualms, is that we.
I wanted to take it to the next level, and in fact, it was touch and go. It nearly happened. I wanted there to be a third Midwinter Nights Jam that was a collaboration,
Hmm.
but it
To
didn't
see them
quite.
come together.
Yeah, it never quite happened. But yeah,
Yeah.
Midwinter Nights Jam from both companies is great. I love both of them. Yeah.
Um. Any suggestions on cigar pairings? Specifically with the original was the original question, but
So Ed, you're probably more of a cigar smoker than me. I in my old now I'm getting not on, but I'm no spring chicken, and I've got kids and stuff. I always tried to enjoy cigars, and I just got to a point where I couldn't quite. I wasn't enjoying it enough, so I've stopped smoking cigars. Not for any other reason than it just wasn't really doing it for me. I'm not the best person to ask. Ed, I know I've seen you puffing a few cigars, right?
I'm actually not a big cigar
No?
aficionado
Ah.
myself. No.
Original is probably one of the harder ones to pair, to be honest, because
Yeah.
it's so light. And
Right.
Glenmorangie 18 as well. You know, I described 18, the original and the 18 as kind of fresh air whiskies. My preferred place to sit and drink both those whiskies is on the porch
Hmm.
in the fresh air and as the sun's going
In Las
down.
Vegas.
Poolside,
Poolside.
135 degrees.
There you go. I prefer 100-degree weather.
So I'm not being very helpful with a cigar suggestion for the original. I don't know. Honestly, I'm not the best person to
Well,
ask.
maybe we can table that one, and I
Yeah.
can try and get back to when we send some more information out on this.
Sure.
I think the last question is a really important one. Can you share your fruitcake recipe?
My fruitcake recipe, yeah, it's you can find it. I can either send it to you somehow, we'll figure it out, or if you Google Delia Smith, that is her name. It's a kind of household name in the UK. Baker chef, Delia, Delia Smith, Delia Smith, Delia Smith Christmas cake recipe. You'll find it pretty quickly. It's online. She starts off by saying, "This is the recipe that my mother used to make, but I've updated it and tweaked it a little bit." I think those are pretty much the words. One word of caution: don't just look at the recipe. You also have to find her instructions for how to, this is bizarre, wrap the cake when you bake it. So you have to make sure it bakes incredibly slowly. And that I use, if I have them, newspapers or parchment paper, many layers. And you actually put parchment inside the tin and on the bottom, put the cake mixture in, and then wrap the whole outside of the cake and the underneath in many layers of parchment as well. And then you put it on a really low, I forget the temperature, really low oven for like 4 or 5 hours.
Ah.
So that's crucial, honestly. Then
Good to know.
Take it out of the oven, you let it cool overnight. Next day, I start pricking it with chopsticks, or my mum used to use knitting needles. And then, Delia talks about adding maybe a couple of dessert spoons worth of whiskey into the cake. What? Couple bottles of whiskey into the cake?
That doesn't sound like enough at all.
Yeah, and that's what you need to do. So actually, even when you start making the cake, the first thing is to get all the different types of dried fruit and pour in a bunch of booze and leave it overnight. So
what whiskey are you using?
All plumped up, full of booze.
What whiskey are you using?
So what did I usually just whatever I pick up. So this year I did put some cake in it.
Did you?
I put cake in the cake.
Yeah, I mean,
Lumsden made his Christmas cake and cake in his cake too. Just so you know, I asked him. I soaked the fruit in Hennessy Black and Glenmorangie Nectar d'Or, and then I've used Nectar d'Or until it all disappeared in my cake. And I will actually, after this, have to go down and feed my cake with something. So I was thinking I've got like kind of sample bottles and sort of ends of stuff that I was going to maybe make into one of those, your home infinity blends. But
Sure.
maybe I'll just do the cake with all
Sounds
the bits.
amazing.
People have asked about putting smoky, like Ardbeg in a Christmas cake.
Is that too much?
I'm not too sure. I haven't done it.
Yeah.
I haven't done it because I don't want to risk it. And I just think
You almost have to make two.
What's that? Someone's make two. Yeah.
Yeah, like experiment.
Really Christmas cake could be the best thing ever, or it could be terrible.
True.
And I don't want to risk that on Christmas Day.
That's fair.
I know that Nectar d'Or works, so yeah.
Whatever's safe.
I'm on a one-man mission just about to prove to America that fruitcake doesn't have to be dry. It really doesn't.
How about next time we'll do this again? You'll make some fruitcake. You'll send it over, and then we'll taste that.
Is that allowed? I think I have to have a food service license. Actually, funny enough, in Texas, because before lockdown, because of the regulations, I have my food service license and my liquor serving license as well. So I think I'm probably okay.
All right, there you go. There you go, people. If you're in Texas, you can go to David's bar.
Does anybody have the Malaga? If anybody wants me to talk about the Malaga, say now. Who makes the better whiskey, Dr. Bill or Jim McEwen?
Ooh.
You know what I think?
I do, I think. What's the answer?
Both legends. Both legends in their own lunchtime, as we like to say in Scotland. Yeah.
Very, very political.
Malaga, please. Somebody said Malaga, please. Okay, so this is another limited release. It is a 12-year-old, so it's 10 plus 2 pretty much. And it is finished in first fill Malaga Dulce casks, so the really sweet Malaga casks. I have to say, one of the things I'm going to order for this Thanksgiving is some Malaga Dulce and some Royal Tokai.
There you go.
I think I need my gout doctor on speed dial.
If I don't hear from you for a few days, I'm really worried.
Right. Malaga Dulce. The wine is made from 2 types of grapes. It's made from Pedro Jimenez, so same grapes that would be used in PX sherry. But it's also, and I'm going to blank on the other type of grapes. Does it help me out on the label? No, it does not. Oh gosh. Well, that's no good. Anyway, it's similar in style. Does somebody know the other type of grape? Muscatel, thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.
Saved.
So PX and Muscatel grapes. So it's not obviously in the Jerez region exactly. It can't be called sherry. It's using a different grape as well. But it has a similar sort of effect. So if you like La Santa, I see La Santa rules the day. Well, and if you're a fan of the private edition number 1, I think, the Glenmorangie Sonalta PX from 11 years ago almost.
Wow.
You will like this. You will most definitely like this. So if you have it, cheers. If you like Eduardo and you don't,
I'll stick to my cake. I'm all right with that.
Eduardo, if you need some, you can figure it out, probably.
We've got witnesses.
There you go. I actually have found a store near me here in Texas that has some on the shelf. So
really?
I meant to go today to go pick it up, but I will be going tomorrow to pick it up. So
that's phenomenal.
And you may have to be patient, but the next time I see you,
I'm sure it'll be spectacular because it's been a while now at this point.
Right. Seriously.
Could you, I know we cracked open the 18 and you had mentioned that it was your favorite, but could you talk to it a little bit more?
Gosh, I
know there's we could do this for.
I'm just taking a moment how good
how long
the Malaga Dulce is. And I'm trying to put a finger on what the aroma is that's so good in there, but there's something. Gosh. Isn't it frustrating and also kind of fun when you pick up an aroma that you love and you know what it is, but your brain can't translate it to the memory of what it is? NNS is who asked, I think, about the Dulce, the Malaga black cherry extract cuts the uric acid that causes gout. Thank you. There we go. Actually, I'm okay. I have never, touch wood, had gout. It does run in my family though. But my neighbor, who is we have a pod family. Their daughter is friends with my kids, so we're kind of they're the only family we see each weekend. And the poor guy has gout right now.
Oh,
yeah. Oof.
Tough thing to have right now.
Not good.
No. David, what part of Texas are you in right now? You're in Dallas?
I am out on the outskirts.
You're right on the outskirts, yeah.
North and east a bit of Dallas. Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, middle of nowhere. It's flat and it's hot. Well, it's actually quite nice right now, though, I have to say. Now is the time to live in Texas because it's like 65, 70 degrees every day, blue skies. Not bad.
Starting to get cold up north.
Yeah, but you
don't miss your Jersey days.
Jersey.
Yeah.
I had a big moment this morning. I was actually trying to find something for somebody based in New Jersey, a bottle or something. So I went on a couple of retailers' websites. And on one retailer's website, who will remain nameless, he's based in New Jersey, there on the website, clear as day, it said that they had Glenmorangie Artane, like the third private edition, the Super Tuscan red wine finish.
Yeah.
The Sassicaia one.
Mm-hmm.
$79.99, which was cheaper than they resold it at the time. So I put 4 of them in the basket straight away, and I thought, I put my credit card in,
sure,
and even if it runs through, I bet you they don't have it, and then I have to have a refund and all the rest. Yeah. So I know the guy who's the whiskey expert at that store. So I texted him and said, "Hey, do you actually have this?" And his response was, "Yeah, we do." I was like, "Shit, wonderful, amazing." He goes, "But we can't ship it out of state." So I was called my old neighbor in New Jersey and said, "You have to accept this, and I'll come get it at some point." And then 5 minutes later, he phoned me and said, I've got them to run the check. No, run the inventory. We don't have any of it.
Yeah,
No, because they're so hard to find. And even when you can find them, they're usually the people, accounts have put them up to $300.
Yeah. I was going to say at that price, there's no way.
I know, but yeah, if you don't ask.
Yeah, right. You got to try. So
somebody was asking, please go through. We haven't done Astar.
Oh, we haven't.
We haven't talked about Astar. So,
ladies and gentlemen, we'll be here all night, apparently.
That was a brief go through the Malaga. Hopefully that was okay, and hopefully you enjoy it. But at the risk of just being here till 2:00 in the morning, Astar. Going back some time, the first Astar was 2011. Was it that? I think 2011. I can't tell from here. And then the second edition of Astar was 2017. What I have is the first edition. I think the person who asked me to talk about it has the first edition. We ascertained that already. What we've done here is some of the project that Bill Lumsden did, looking at improving the quality of American oak that we were getting, working with the Coopers in the States a long time ago, fed into a bunch of different releases over the years. As the experiments were he was tiptoeing around and working out what was working. So there were things like Artisan Cask back in the day, a long time ago, Glenmorangie Cellar 13, that had elements of the experimental American white oak casks in them. But the first one where we really went all out and said, right, here's Glenmorangie, just aged in what we described as our designer casks. I really hate that term, but there we go. Makes me think of one of those polo shirts with a crocodile on it that everyone wore in the 80s. Anyway, designer casks. Lacoste, that was it.
Look, yeah.
Hey, I'm so old.
I couldn't even
Eduardo,
remember.
that Lacoste was trendy in the 80s and went massively out of fashion and then came back into fashion again. So anyway, designer casks, slow growth American oak, 100 to 150-year-old trees that are actually the most sustainable trees that are logged in the Ozarks, because we are going in and not clear cutting forests, we're taking particular trees and it's thinning the forest, which actually helps it regenerate. So 150-year-old American white oak that is grown very slowly. And what happens when a tree grows, you did ask somebody for some geeky science. You're getting it now. You're getting it.
There it is.
When a tree grows very slowly, it means that it's not really growing in the summer months. All trees grow in the springtime. It's the spring, that's what life does. And so there's two parts to the ring structure, each annual ring in a tree. There's the spring growth, which all trees do. And then there's the summer growth, which slow growth trees do hardly any of, and fast growing trees do a lot of. Now, the spring growth in that ring is the oak that is really porous microscopically.
Mm-hmm.
Summer growth is, Eduardo's falling asleep, as is everyone else. Summer growth is much tighter grain, less spongy. So if you can find a tree that is mostly spring growth, it will be mostly spongy, porous oak. That's good. A sponge soaks up more spirit.
Right.
We want the oak the barrel to soak up more spirit, allow the spirit deeper into the wood so it can extract more flavor. So what we've worked on is trying to maximize the amount of spring wood in our oak trees and create this incredibly porous oak that is then air seasoned out in the open for 2 to 3 years rather than kiln drying. That preserves the porosity of the barrels. They're then coopered into casks from being quarter-sawn planks that were air seasoned. They are not heavily charred. We don't want that. That would deal with things. We want a very light char. We need some char, otherwise you need to open the surface of the inside of the barrel up to allow the in-drink as well. Light char, heavy toast. And a toast is when we take something like basically a heating probe, like very crudely a filament from an electric heater or something, and it goes into the barrel with the lid off, and there's no flame, but it toasts into the wood. That caramelizes the inside of the barrel and creates all these lovely caramelization effects, coconut notes, vanilla and such like. And that's what we're looking for. The whiskeys, there's American whiskey put into most of those barrels for 4 to 6 years, not 46, 4 to 6 years, and then they're emptied. They're shipped whole. We don't flat pack them down and reconstruct them. They're shipped whole and empty to Scotland. And for us, we think we've come across like the best spec of American oak for Scotch whiskey. Astar shows that off. It's all first fill designer cask. This one is the 2011, bottled at a whopping 57.1%, 114.2 proof, right there. The second edition, which came out in 2017, slightly different proof, same idea with the casks, delicious whiskey. It's been a while since I have.
And you're gonna have some now.
Oh, dear.
Now you're just being rude.
The cork's quite dry. Eduardo, you must have had Astar.
I do. I actually do, and I'm in the process of moving, so everything's been packed. But
that's right, because you're a relatively.
I kept the important things, obviously.
Are you in Virginia now?
Not yet. I'm actually headed down to North Carolina, but I'm in a neighboring state. I'm in Maryland right now.
Ah, that's where my wife was from.
That's right. That's right.
Indeed.
Jeff Dowers asked, "Is it available?" If you're asking about, we have the
Astar, I'm afraid, was a special request from a couple of people who had it. I don't think you'll find it very easily now.
Yeah.
Either versions.
That wasn't the 2017 version. Wasn't the private edition.
Nope.
It
No,
was a separate rerun of.
it's just a little surprise for people that
Yes,
like that
that's
stuff.
right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah.
I forget
And
what
to
the.
be clear as well, the private edition series ran for 10 years, and that was it. We kind of called it a day on the marketing construct of private edition. And some people thought, oh, we called a day on experimentation. No, no. The opposite. So Cake is not the 11th edition of private edition,
No.
but its soul is there for sure.
Mm-hmm. So before we go on to anything else, I mean, we're a little bit over schedule.
Someone asked about Spios.
Yeah, well, I just want real quick, because I know some people are starting to slowly hop off.
We've lost half of them.
No, it's fine. I do want to say again, thank you to the Virginia ABC, everybody who's joined us from the team, everybody who made this possible. David, thank you for, and we'll still be here after this, but I do want to do the thank yous for your time today and your expertise, and just fun always to get a chance to chat over some Glenmorangie with you. And a little humble plug, we do have another tasting coming up at the end of the year with Hennessy, and that's going to be with Jordan Bushell, our global, our national brand ambassador, mixologist.
I think he's global.
He's global. We'll go with global on December 10th, and we'll be going through some Hennessy there, and I'll send out something else behind that. But again, David, thank you so much. We will continue to be here, so anybody who wants to stay on will stay on and answer any other questions that you might have, but just wanted to say that.
Yeah. No, the Hennessy one should be fun. I'd quite like to sign up and just, could you send me the link? Even if
I will, yeah, of course.
ABC, I'd love to just listen in, because it's been a while.
Yeah, and I know I've been seeing through the chat there, people have had issues finding some of the taster packs and whatnot. If you go on the site, they do have stock information on there by brand that you search. If you have any issues, feel free to reach out to myself or to Jim Woods. I put that in here, and I'll send that out again. And we'll try and get you the Glenmorangie that you need.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks everyone for all 72 of you that have stayed on, all 150 of you that started.
You get a special prize. No.
It's amazing that so many people have come on, and just stick with it, everyone. The light is at the end of the tunnel for all this craziness. We will hopefully be toasting in person soon, and some good will come out of all this. I'm sure it has to. That's it.
Here's to that.
Too depressing and too emotional, but yeah, we'll get through it. I think we're not turning the corner because things are pretty bad, but we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there.
Well, indeed.
Yeah. What does it look like? What's the future look like for Scotch whiskey? Well, as long as you guys keep drinking it, very bright. No, seriously, who knows? Crystal ball is not something that works very well in the Scotch industry. It hasn't historically. We've had, over the centuries, there've been ups and downs and ups and downs. I'm such a geek. I read up on all this stuff, and you can go back to the 1600s and 1700s, and there's fights over taxation and politics and all the rest. Just in the UK, let alone looking at how that. I haven't even looked at how that played out in the States. But who knows? I mean, it's been very bright. This year's numbers for most of the established brands are actually, sales numbers are really good. That's not. I don't feel particularly good about that, because I know how much all my friends in the bar world are hurting. It's a tough one, and smaller brands, some are doing okay, some aren't. But we'll get through it. I'm not going to touch the question about Scotch tariffs.
Neither am I. Moving on.
First rule of the company is no politics.
And then that's back to Cadball.
Cadball, yes. Oh dear. Yeah, that would be a quick way to lose your job.
Don't do that.
There was a it reminds me, I don't know why it makes me think of this, of a TV commercial in the UK when I was growing up in Scotland that was for Sharp lager, which I don't think is even available anymore. And the tagline, there was always like some guy getting into a situation, like going to a party somewhere and the party was terrible, and he'd have a pint of Sharp and then leave as quite fast as he could. And it was always time for a Sharp, time for a Sharp exit, or something like that. It was terrible commercials, but anyway, that's how I feel.
Yeah, you remember.
That's how I feel about getting asked questions like that. It's like, whoop, bye.
I gotta go.
Whiskey and Scotch is getting me through pandemic. Me too. Absolutely.
Yes, sir. Amen.
Yeah. And in fact, I've really enjoyed doing a lot of these Zooms personally. It's kind of keeping me somewhat sane. Not that I was ever sane. But...
Well, it's nice to just chat over some amazing bottles over here.
Do you have a must-have from the Prestige or private collection that's available? Jeff, for me, the 18. I mean, that's I've already mentioned that, but 18 all day long.
Ooh, what about Signet?
Signet, right? Here's a story for Signet from this week, from this very week. I love Signet; it's great, but the 18 is very different, and for me, it would just top it as the one I would take to a desert island. But here's the question. Here's the story about Signet. I did an online tasting with a group from New York City, beginning of the week.
Mm-hmm.
Was it last week? I can't remember. Everything's running together. And for one reason or other, I couldn't pull some bottles from our head office in New York, so I had to get a retailer to deliver a couple of bottles to the group in New York. And they were kind enough actually to send me a little tiny sample bottle of the whiskey. So I had exactly what they were tasting, exactly. The sample of Signet was astounding. It
Really?
was the best Signet I've ever tasted. To the point where I asked the guy, if you haven't thrown the bottle away, right, you still have it, and he still had it. And on the back of all our bottles, it's hard to see, but somewhere on the back of all our bottles, there's usually like a laser etched or ghost printed security code, which is there in case we ever, God forbid, have a recall or anything. Mm-hmm. It lets us track exactly the minute and the day of bottling. So I asked him to tell me it, and it turns out it's a bottling from like late spring of this year. We don't bottle Signet that often, so one of the most recent bottlings of Signet. If you like Signet, super, super espresso, really espresso-y, this batch, I mean, there is always some variation in Signet. It's a devil to make, and it is a relatively small amount we make, so there is some variation. Wowza, this batch from this year, I am going to try and figure out how to get my hands on some more, because it was that good.
Feel free to, if you get an extra bottle that you want to share with a dear friend,
you need to go carefully get into the ABC stores and go look on the shelves and see if you can figure out if it's a bottling from this year. It'll be good anyway, but if it's a bottling from this year, get it immediately. Send it to me.
More insider info.
I mean, maybe it was just a random thing. I mean, who knows? It was a sample from a single bottle of two that I bought, that were bought from this store. So who knows? No guarantees, but I was astounded by it. So, yeah. It doesn't have batch numbers on it, but it just said something like March, was it April, May, I think, bottling on the laser etch. It was for me, it was my taste. I really, really want to get my hands on some more of those bottles and hoard it. Yeah.
I think I'm looking through this, and one of the nice notes Charles just said, I'm a new Scotch drinker. I've tried blended in the past. I didn't care for it. I really enjoy Glenmorangie. And I think if we're going to end on something, I think that's a really nice way of, Glenmorangie has such a range from the original to the extra matured to all of these different expressions that Bill's gone through over the years. That's a really nice introduction into the single malt category, and it's got so much, so many different taste profiles that you can try.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it'll be kind to you as a newbie, but it'll still entertain you decades later. Here's the thing about
Totally.
Glenmorangie.
Totally.
Somebody asked a quick question, and maybe this can be the last one. I keep, I get the feeling Eduardo thinks it's time to wrap it up.
You really miss hanging out with me, huh?
Yeah. LH says, is the 18 just the original Ace Longer on American Oak, or is there some special treatment? Great question. The 18 is not just the 10-year-old, 8 years more on American Oak. We make the 18 by aging all of it initially for 15 years in American Oak. So guess what? A bit like that. And then 30%, so 30 out of every 100 barrels of the whiskey that gets to 15 in American Oak is transferred to Oloroso sherry casks for a further 3-year finish in sherry. 70 out of every 100 barrels is allowed to go all the way through in American Oak. So, in the warehouse, we, I guess, make 2 different 18-year-olds. They have different flavor profiles. One's a fairly heavy sherry finish. One is fully American Oak. But we combine the 2 together. Now, don't get worried. It's still a single malt. It's all made by us. And we are always combining barrels together, for any of these. None of this is single cask. So it's just a very thought through way of doing it. And the reason we do it is we felt that the American Oak by itself at 18 can sometimes leave a little bit of angularity, tannic note on the finish, and having a little bit of sherry finish, sherry influence in there as well. Doesn't give you an overtly sherried whiskey, but it just polishes off any excesses of the American Oak more than anything. And I love it. It's just darn good.
Island, if you're stranded on an island.
Yep, Desert Island Draft, Glenmorangie 18.
That's the one.
That is the one, 100%.
Did you get into Signet, or did we get sidetracked?
I just mentioned about this latest batch being my favorite. I guess quickly that Signet is the only whiskey in the world, or was certainly the only whiskey in the world when it first came out 11, 12 years ago, that was using barley that had been tumble roasted to become what's called chocolate malt. Brewers would call it chocolate malt. Hold on a minute. Where are we? Where's my samples? How's it disappeared? That is bizarre.
So many bottles, and you lose that one. It's a tough one to misplace.
A bottle full of barley, which isn't the most interesting bottle. Anyway, regular barley looks like that, as I'm sure you know, kind of creamy colors.
Mm-hmm.
Chocolate malt, it's barley, but it looks like coffee. It looks like coffee beans. It's that black and it's that dark. And it is tough to use because you have caramelized any fermentable sugars and starches. You've destroyed enzymatic activity. Since we're only allowed to use water barley yeast in the Scotch industry, you wouldn't get any fermentation happening, no alcohol creation. So someone at the very beginning asked about mash bill. This is the one time I would maybe steal the term mash bill, because we use about 80% regular Glenmorangie barley and about 20% chocolate malted barley, kind of mash bill idea. And the chocolate malt's just along as a free rider to give the flavor, and the regular barley's there to do the hard work and create the alcohol. And that whiskey is aged and becomes a component of Signet. It's not even all of it. There's also some Glenmorangies that are much older, dating from the 70s, fully sherry matured in Signet. There's also some whiskey quite similar to Astar, in fact, very similar to Astar in Signet. And it's all there to bring a balance to the table. And at the end of the day, Signet should have an overtly espresso coffee, dark chocolate notes, but not be bitter in any way, which is where espresso can go sometimes, where espresso beans can definitely go, and even very dark chocolate can go a bit bitter. We didn't want that. So what better thing to bring back the creaminess than Astar, and Astar similar components? What better way to bring a sweetness than some really old sherried whiskey? So it's genius work by Bill Lumsden. World Whiskey of the Year by the International Whiskey Competition 2 years ago now, I think.
Yeah, and Master Distiller of the
Master
Year.
Distiller of the Year, indeed.
Right.
Legend in his own lunchtime.
There it is. And on that note,
Indeed. Cool.
David, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time. Hopefully we get to do this again soon. Hopefully I actually get to do this in person.
Yes.
Because it's definitely been way too long. And thanks again to everybody who stayed along, all 58 of you.
Yeah, we got down to a third. We scared off 2/3.
That's fine.
No, it'd be fun to come down, come up from Texas, where I'm.
That's true.
To have a little trip for sure. I spend a lot of time flying through Virginia because I'm in Dallas is technically Virginia, right?
That's true. Yeah.
Fly through Dallas most times now when I fly back to Scotland, so quite often. So.
Well, we'll have to link up at some point. But
absolutely.
Thank you again. Have a great rest of your night. Have everyone else. Slanja.
Thanks. Slanja. Cheers, everyone.
Good night, David.
Good night. Good night, Eduardo.
Good night.